Welcome. Today at the Building the New World Conference, we're going to start with the sector presentations. And this morning, it's Sector 1, Learning and Education, with Kiran Bir Sethi and Gina Mazza. Kiran is a Global Teacher Prize finalist who founded the Riversides School and the Design for Change movement in India. As a trained designer and a mother, Kiran was dissatisfied with the primary schools in India. So she asked herself, can we design school in a better way? She then built Riverside School from the ground up, and she treated the children as her clients. In addition, Kiran's cutting-edge curricula has been adopted in more than a dozen countries, and she has sparked an international movement that promotes 4 core educational values: feel, imagine, do, and share. Our other speaker this morning is Gina Mazza, who has 25 years of experience in journalism, publishing, public relations, and business marketing. Her writings focus on topics such as personal growth, human potential, integrative medicine, consciousness transformation, and living life inspired by a higher purpose and an awareness of one's personal relevance. As a journalist, Gina has profiled physicians, theologians, politicians, athletes, best-selling authors, and celebrities. Today, she'll be in discussion with Kiran, one of the most innovative teachers in the world. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you, Laura. That's too much pressure. Hi, Gina.
Good morning, Kiran. I'm so excited to talk with you today, and welcome everyone. Good morning and good afternoon. And I just think it makes perfect sense that we're starting out this entire summit with the education and learning sector, because education, as you know, Kiran, is foundational. Everything that we learn and we adopt as we're growing up sets the foundation for the rest of our lives. And our children, of course, they're always at the leading edge of our evolution, right? And so it makes sense that our educational and learning practices would evolve as well. And perhaps no one knows this better than you, right? Because you have lived this your entire life from what it sounds like. And so I'm really excited to be in this, as you say, this conversation.
True.
Yeah. And so speaking of foundation, I'm curious to know your background growing up in India and your education, and what sort of set the foundation for you to go into the field of education.
You know, I actually had, I think, a very unusual upbringing, because one of the things that I was never made to understand was my gender. I was never made to kind of understand that my gender was either a hindrance or, you know, a barrier to my own life story or my worldview. And that's an unusual thing in India, you know, because so much of it is based out of, and I would say this not just in India, but across the world, we put our filters are either about age, gender, or demographics when we look at children and upbringing. And I was actually, I had the freedom of none of these filters. I think that's possibly got to do with the way I understood the world. And I kind of figured very early on that why not? Who said what's possible? And I guess that was for me, in hindsight, when I look at all the decisions I made, I believe the seeds of it were planted in my childhood. The idea that I had voice, I had a story, and I could live it out as long as I was willing to take the responsibility for the decisions I was making. So it was not a frivolous way of voice. It was not like I want to do it and I have the freedom and I must have my right. I think a lot of it, what I understood was that I had duties to perform to earn these rights. And I guess in a way, I grew up believing that a voice matters, that your identity was built on your belief systems and your values, not either your gender or just your nationality. So I think that was unusual. So I think the choice of even education, I'm talking about 35 years ago, nobody had a clue about design, right? And imagine a parent saying, go and have a design education. So I think so many of those little stepping stones to where I see my life story kind of unfold was with my father and my mother. They were insane, crazy people. My father was also a designer, so design was in my space. My mother was just a fierce, fabulous woman, so she really kind of gave us to believe that that a woman mattered, and the woman's presence mattered. So I think I learned a lot from mimicking what I saw of her capabilities. I had a crazy brother and sister older to me. I'm the youngest, so I was a little spoiled, but I think I had so much more freedom to grow up. And so, yeah, I had a home filled with love and laughter. And I think that was the richness that is incomparable. I think if you have a home filled with love and laughter and stories, you just get a view of the world that is a lot more, I think, optimistic and hopeful and creative. So yeah, so that was my upbringing.
It sounds like a beautiful combination of nature and nurture, because you obviously have a very buoyant personality as well, and a very curious personality. And it sounds like you had fabulous parents growing up.
Yes.
So how was your experience, your actual experience in school growing up in India?
I don't think we ever questioned school. We just had to go. We had to kind of just complete whatever had to be done. I don't think, honestly, I can't remember learning very much from school, but I think I forged very strong friendships in school. So I think that was my learning. I learned about myself rather than about anything else. I genuinely believe. It was a very traditional all-girls school. I can't remember actually not wanting to go to school. So it wasn't like an experience that I'm not fond of. But if I were to say, did the school give me stories? I don't have stories. I have 15 years that I know I spent in this place, but I don't have vital learning stories that I picked up. I mean, yes, I can talk about the times we may have, put a prank or we went to a picnic, but I can't remember lucidly learning anything. So, and I think that's again, in hindsight, when I started Riverside, I said, my God, our children have to have stories. I mean, they have to go out, having those, again, those seeds that were planted, they have to be able to pick up and say where that happened. So I have fond memories and great friendships. But if you go to an all-girls school in India 40 years ago, it's a very different understanding of the world. But a lot of my learning was done at home. My father was, like I said, crazy, and he would just give us these random challenges, and we would be doing plays, and we would be doing stuff that was, not necessarily the norm. I still remember in my grade 7, I was 12 years old, and we had the very first project. We were given a project to do, and that was, again, crazy, because you never were given projects 40 years ago. And it was about living beings or some random stuff like that. So all the girls, being girls, we were put into groups, and several of them said, oh, we will study the butterfly, or we will study a goldfish. And me, being crazy, decided, no, we will do none of that. We will study a snake. And it was complete. I'm just thinking to myself now, who would have thought of that? Well, not only did I think that we would study a snake, I got my team members to give me 2 rupees each, princely sum of 2 rupees. I gathered like this 20 rupees. And then I got my parents to take me all the way across the city I used to stay in called Bangalore in the south of India. And I picked up a snake. And my father and mother didn't even once say, I don't think that's a good idea. Of course, my brother and sister had this dramatic outburst. The snake will be in the house, or we will. And but all my father said was just this. He said, if you can't look after it, then you will have to let it go. Again, the whole idea that I trust you, I think you are making something, but be responsible about the choice. And I went and I got this snake, and I got it back to school, and we had this big drama. And finally, of course, I couldn't feed it anymore because I used to bribe the watchman to give me frogs and lizards. It was crazy. But finally, when I couldn't find frogs anymore, I decided, okay, I have to let it go. But that's the kind of stuff that happened, at home. So I think, yeah. So a lot of what I understood about myself and about what was possible, I think, was part of that story.
Well, there's a story that you definitely remember. And I love what you're saying too about you don't remember necessarily what you learned in school, but you remember the relationships that you built in school. And I think that's part of what formed your philosophy too. So let's jump ahead to that. I want to first mention that you didn't immediately go into education, you went into design, right? So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I went to the design college, I graduated, and I started my design firm. And I was doing these crazy stuff, designing restaurants and designing experiences. So a lot of what I did when I graduated was really an experience design. Whilst I graduated as a visual communicator, and that was my discipline, I remember when I went into design, the natural understanding of how does the user interface with design was something I loved. I loved the user experience, not just the visual communication part of it, but the user experience. And I think a lot of my early years as a designer were built in really understanding the user experience. And I think that formed such a strong, intuitive base of my design education. So that really became part of my story, yeah.
Right. And then when did you switch over to education? When did you first have the idea that you ultimately wanted to someday build a school?
I didn't want to. I was living a fantastic life. I had no interest in doing all of this. And then I became a mother. And I remember holding my son in my arms and falling in love. And I remember, thinking and promising him that his story would be known by the world. All these grand dreams as a mother you have. So I think my interest in education, not of schooling, but just of learning, not even of education, just that learning, because I had experienced what learning was at my design college. I still remember walking in and remembering, my God, this is what learning should feel like. It should sound like, it should be that idea of deep engagement. So I had experienced that in my design college. And then, of course, when my son was ready to go to school and I put him into the regular so-called premier school in the city, oh my God, I remember very clearly, very early on, and I think in 3 months I said, oh no, this can't be it. Because I experienced two, and I think they're not unusual. You see, that's the thing I know now. These are the ways we get our children and we reward compliance over conversation. We do it so well in education, right? We expect our children to be good children. And good means be quiet and be compliant. And whatever I tell you, and if you answer what I want you will be rewarded, And that idea gets into our children so early because they start mimicking that. And that's the whole point of education, right? Very early on, our children, it kickstarts the mirror neurons and we mimic what we see played out. And our children start becoming compliant and they start telling us that if I say the right thing and there's only one right answer, I will be rewarded. And I saw that happening to my son, just literally in 3 months. And I just intuitively realized that this is not good enough. I mean, I still remember one moment which kind of pushed me, and I said I was leaving the school, was in 3 months I'd gone to ask the teacher, I said, tell me about my son, tell me his story, tell me what he likes to do. And she really just looked at me and said, what is his number? The roll number. He didn't even have a name. He didn't have a story. That's it. He just was a statistic of this nation, of all the children that go to schools, and they just fall out of the system. Right. So I think that just prompted me. And I think I responded in two ways. As a mother, I said, boss, this is not happening. But then as a designer, I think my view was, what if I mean, there has to be a better way. So I think I had the luxury, I would say, of my design education and the benefit of it to ask the question. And not just respond as a mother and, just say, oh my God, this is the way it's always been, or I'll just change the school, or I'll complain, right? That's one of the things we do so well. But I think I attribute so much of it to my design education to say, my God, there has to be a better way. So I remember taking him out of school that day, and I called up my husband and said, boss, I'm starting a school. And I think he was married enough years to know that I was a little mad and I would do what I said. So I set out to start the school in my home.
Yeah, so things do change when you become a parent, and no pun intended, but necessity is the mother of invention, right? So you took a lot of what you were feeling and intuiting and started to put it and utilize your design skills and put it into this new venture. So in 2001, you did found the Riverside School in India, correct? And it has become known as a laboratory for prototyping design processes that facilitate transformative student experiences. So let's get into the specifics of that and what that actually, I'm curious to actually know visually what that looks like as well.
Well, I think because, and I say this with deep humility, not with any kind of arrogance, but I say because I didn't come from an education background, I think I was completely liberated by all the, you have to do this, or this has to be done. I had no constraints for asking the question, what if and why not? So I think the idea of design also starts with questioning the status quo, not just being a little creative with what is, but showing what can be. I think that's the power of what design does, right? And so because I didn't have any shackles, because I didn't have to have any kind of reference point of, school or education, everything was a canvas, to start with. And my kids, and I'm talking about very young, so they were my children, my oldest was 6 years old, right? I really got them to become my co-designers in the process. So I think going back to them was a design mindset, but to listen to children, to really listen to our children was my go-to reference point. So I think just observing them, just getting them to be involved in, does this work? How does this work? I mean, it was such an amazing story. I mean, we keep thinking experts are the ones who write the theories. I swear experts are those children. They are whole people and they have the directions to show you. Of course, you cannot be naive about it. And then subsequently, we did a lot of the other stuff. But I have to tell you that they were my guiding principles. They were really my lighthouse. When in doubt, I would go back to them and say, tell me how this works. So everything about the school, whether it was the lack of a timetable, the fact that our children were doing real world projects as young as 6 years old, the jury system, the idea that they designed their day every single day was something that became part of the journey, that became part of the story. And I think the agency that I started seeing of children, the idea of agency, but catalyzed by empathy. And I think that's one of the key things I keep talking, which is a distinction between what I would say project-based learning and I would say design thinking agency, because I think the idea of project-based learning is still a teacher comes in and says, hi, children, I think I have a great project for you and let's change this. But I think with the framework we designed, which was feel, imagine, do, share, the question was, what is it that bothers you? And let's listen to you. And that then drives the change. Not, I will tell you what to change, or I will show you that this is important. But it was listening to saying, what is it that bothers you? And then they would tell you that. And then that respect you give to a child's voice, that is a powerful, space in which they realize who they are. And their worldview changes because of that. So I think a lot of it became that. Subsequently, we started seeing the work they were doing, whether it was designing, butterfly gardens for the city park, whether it was designing audio tours for the zoo, whether it was designing tourist maps for the tourism department. I'm talking about 6, 7, 8, 9-year-olds. Wow. And that was something to say that they were blurring the boundaries between school and life. So it was not that I would be great in school, but I will learn skills that were valuable for life. That was the shift. And once we saw this was happening at school, I think we just kind of captured that and said it has to go to more children. And that's how actually Design for Change was born, in 2009.
And I think it's so powerful that you, when we spoke earlier, you were talking about the students were the client. So when the architect came in, they were able to articulate what it is that they wanted from their own free thinking, and that they had a sense of ownership in their own school because of that. And I don't know if we're ready to show the slides yet, but I would love to see, again, I think this will give us a context for all of these wonderful things that you're talking about, to actually see the physical spaces where they're doing these various activities.
Yeah, you have to see the space. If we could share a little bit, I will show you the little, how the space becomes such a catalyst for learning. So for instance, one of the things that the architect was kind of given as a brief was yin and yang, the idea of the balance, right? It was harmony. Harmony was a key word about how children find their space. So the built and the natural, intimate and community, secure and transfer. Like you can see, the kids were actually even workers. So they actually became the kind of contractors in the space as well. So if I could go to the next slides, I'll just show you a little bit about how the space. Well, that's the middle school. That's a lot of the trees were planted, Gina, to actually get different birds to be part of the school ecosystem. So as of today, we have identified 27 different species of birds, and they come through the year. Right now, it's the time for the drongos, the woodpeckers, the kingfisher, the egrets. All of them are the birds that you can see now in the monsoon. If we can go ahead, I will show you a little bit more glimpses of the schoolyard. We can go to the next one. Yes, that's the older, that's part of the middle years and the older school. Yes. And as you can see, the materials are really natural. So it's a lot of brick, because this was harking back to my design college. So my architect once had asked me, he said, what place made you feel alive? And I said, my design college when I walked in, and a lot of it was exposed brick. So as you can see, that's here. Yes, we can go to the next. Yes. And how the space also becomes a third teacher. You'll see that the kids are all over the place using the space. Can we go to the next couple of slides where they're sitting on the steps and possibly running a class here? Next one. There you can see. So there are lots of places in the school which are intimate, which are these open spaces, but become these gatherings for learning. So it's all over the place. Yes, next. Yeah, all places convert into maybe making a stage. A stage can become a performance theater. It can become a place for a workshop, so it really is fluid. We can go to the next. Yeah, so we have conversations. We have a lot of master classes. So a lot of people, the kids get to hear what we call meeting of minds. So a lot of minds come in and, just shape the conversation. So that's a master class happening. Next one. Yeah, that's a little lovely intimate story well. So we've got a little, these really wonderful little spaces where the children come and listen to stories. And this is used by everybody, mind you, right from the youngest to the teachers. So at different times, different people are occupying the story well, and that becomes a space to learn. Yeah, next. There we are sitting outside. Next. Okay, next. So as you can see, all the spaces are being used for learning. We can go to the next. Transparency is a key word. So there is no staff room or a principal's cabin. That's one of the things I realized very early on, that the more physical boundaries you put, the more mental boundaries get done. So one of the key design features was to remove as many physical boundaries between people and between learning. So that was another big design decision. Yeah, so if we could just roll some of the pictures now, so just you'll get a feeling of it's all over the place. A staff meeting can happen, just sitting on benches outside. Yeah, we could go to the next one. So A lot of glass, a lot of transparency. And by the way, a lot of the transparency has helped in just emotional well-being of children. Just the idea that they feel more confident because they are visible, in a way has given a huge amount of emotional safety to our children. And I would encourage a lot of school design to be built around that. Yeah, next. So relationships is a big one. You'll see, somebody once said, the school feels like a hug. Walking it just feels like, somebody's just, it feels that safe. That's, by the way, one of a staff meeting happening right there, just out there. So there's no, like I said, a staff room, but that could just convert into a lovely place for having a meeting. Yeah, next. Yeah, just we can just now roll the slides. You can just get a glimpse of all the wonderful idea of aesthetics. Yeah. Next. Yeah. Next. Yeah. That's what you will see. A lot. You'll hear a lot of laughter. You'll see a lot of this intimacy. Yeah, that's really what Riverside was built on. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a glimpse of the school.
You can see in looking at those slides that the aesthetic of the space, how it engenders those characteristics of compassion and trust and creative freedom. And yeah, I'm really curious about, what you said about that the space, there's no borders or boundaries. It's transparent, but at the same time, the children feel safe.
I'll tell you something that so much of, I keep sharing with schools as well. How you feel is how you will file. It's not the other way around. And we often have created spaces in schools which are so sort of intimidating that then there is less likelihood that children are going to learn for life, right? So one of the things that how the space has to be designed talks a lot about how you will understand learning. You will again understand how a space provides a space, a mental understanding of learning. But you will start realizing what trust feels like. And then you will live out that. You're not just learning math, science, and English in school, right? That's something you can learn even by yourself. But the ability to understand how people interact, how the feeling of ethics, the feeling of empathy, the feeling of relationships, that's what you will see work out. And I keep telling that the children are watching you even when you don't know, and they're kind of seeing those cues. They're wondering, okay, are you being a role model for me to kind of understand, and that this is how relationships can feel like, and this is how it is lived out. They're learning what you're not teaching them, and I think that's what space can do. So I think a space design is as important as anything else that you might put in.
Absolutely, it's so beautiful. I mean, I wish I would have gone to school there.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the curriculum. You talk about differentiated learning, and I know you have grades, just like we have here in the United States, for example. But I know that there's a lot of difference, too, in the way you're approaching those grade levels and even what they're learning. Do you want to talk a little bit about the curriculum itself?
Well, again, I not to kind of say that we're not doing the math, science, and English. Of course we are, because these are foundational skills and competencies that build you up for success in life, right? I mean, those are where you build your building blocks. I think the whole piece that we've taken ownership of was how our children will use these building blocks. I think it's not the what, but the how. How do I make sense of learning? So it's more a metacognitive journey of learning rather than just the subject matter that I will learn. So the questions that are posed, the purpose of learning, the relevance of how this matters in life, not just for your test. I think that's the fundamental shift. So it's not really rocket science. We're not doing anything that is hugely creative or dramatic. I think we've just kind of focused our attention on not the what, but the how and the why. Okay, and then just that has meant that the approach to learning the heavy lifting of the thinking gets done by the children. I think that's really where the real interactions are. That's the real curriculum or syllabus, for lack of anything else. Because I keep saying, you can now learn math by yourself. You really don't even have to come to school for that. Frankly, if you ask me, I think, what will you do with math? How will you make sense of mathematical or logical understanding and thinking? How do you find causal relationships? Why does it matter to find these connections in life? That's really where we put the bulk of our time. And of course, a lot of it is through apprenticeship. A lot of it is through internships. A lot of it is through real client projects. So we now have children being used as designers for corporates. So we have people actually coming and saying, listen, we need the next menu designed for a restaurant, for a sort of a children's menu. Can you come and do the research? Our kids have come up with the next flavor of ice cream for the big ice cream manufacturer. So I think what we've realized is that if kids are able to look at their skills in life, that's the basic gist of the curriculum. That has made the biggest difference. And service learning. So I keep saying, when children do good, they will do well. So a lot of the time is spent in acts of change and making sure that they're working on real projects. So again, nothing rocket science. I mean, I keep saying that, that none of it is experimental. None of it is like saying, oh my God, let's make it completely new. I just think the focus of what we spend our time in is where we've chosen to get our children to be active agents of change. I think that's really the difference.
And it looks like you do the how very well. When I look at some of the things that you've set up, again, it just seems so fun. Like, I wanted to go to school there, like Funderstanding. I want to know what Funderstanding is. And you have business challenges and college fairs and buddy interaction and assemblies and camps and exchange programs. I mean, it sounds so rich and inviting. Like, I just want to be there. And certainly as a parent, I want to send my kids to that kind of environment. So speak a little bit about all of that, because that sounds like a wildly creative way to set up the how part of the education.
Well, I think, let me just kind of first frame it as to what the value proposition of Riverside is, right? I think that will then make a lot of sense of all the other pieces of it. For us, I keep saying, we're born human by chance, but we become humane by choice. And that's the role education plays. And I ask you to focus on that word humane with the word E, the letter E. Okay, that's really where the real magic comes. So the E's that make our value proposition Riverside are the 5 E's. Empathy, so it always starts with empathy about who I am, and I am because of you, right? The understanding of myself in relation to you, all right? So that's the first E, empathy. The second is ethics, the constant quest about doing what is right over what is easy, whether it is in the decisions we'll make about going on a Saturday for persistence or taking time off to do a buddy when I want to actually go and spend time with my friends. It's these decisions we keep pushing our children on. We keep saying, you're not entitled to this life. You will make your presence felt. So the second E is ethics. The third is excellence. The idea that rigor by itself, just copying or writing 500 words, don't really make sense if there is not a pursuit of excellence. How do you refine? How do you have the time for prototyping and refinement? That's critical, because one of the things that I have a real problem with is the word failure. We think children fail, and that's absolutely a wrong message. The idea of giving a feedback loop so that I can refine what I learn, that's the opportunity for taking choice, right? But in school, we don't give that. We just give a mark, they have a test, and that's it. And I don't even know where I can be better with, the refinement. So that's excellence. The fourth is elevation, the idea of abundance, the idea of appreciation. So we have a lot of things called peer and public scrutiny, or peer and self-reflection, the idea of appreciating you because I'm confident of who I am. Otherwise, we are really have a scarcity mentality in our heads. We don't want to give another an appreciation because we think that's less of us. So elevation is a big piece of building abundance. And the last is evolution, the fifth E, the idea the growth mindset, what Carol has so beautifully kind of articulated, but the idea of I am better than yesterday and less than tomorrow. So we have a lot of processes called closing the loop, reflective circles, being able to have a zero period and seeing my learning. So a lot of our practices were built to live out the value proposition of Riverside. The fact that we will graduate humane citizens to this world who will demonstrate the values of being empathetic or ethical or pursue excellence. So that's really how it is. So everything that was created, whether it's a understanding, that means making visible my learning, these are for the younger children, or the business challenge for the older children about making an actual entrepreneurial idea, but with ethical choices, because we keep giving them ethical dilemmas. We say, okay, we'll suddenly put a little bit of a twist and say, now you can either let one of your teammates go or earn a little bit of extra money, and then we'll figure out how they're thinking. So are they willing to let one of their teammates go in the pursuit of money, or are they going to say no, we want our teammates? So it's all of these experiences which we're giving our children to constantly tell them that, boss, you're not entitled to this world. Yeah, you have to make your time matter, otherwise you're just taking up space. So for me, that's really good. And I'd like to share one really powerful piece is the last graduating portfolio. We have the children go through an experience called INSANE. And it's insane for two reasons. Okay, it's an acronym for the inner sanitation experience. It's also insane because it is literally 2 weeks before their final exit examination. We take them away for 2 days of immersion, where we do meditation, we are in silence, and we work with the rag pickers of the city. We go at 5 a.m, we take the whole rag picking tour with the ladies. We experience what it is that those women go through. Then we sort the rags, and we put the rags away to say how. So the idea for our children is to say that whilst you want to get your grades, remember that will be just a small piece in the bigger picture. So just settle that noise and that you are hearing about, oh, my marks matter. And remember, you're remarkable, not just markable. And in that, it is crazy, the internal transformation they go through. And I keep telling them, remember, I wish for you great success, but remember this face. Because whenever in life you do something, remember, if you don't make life for somebody better, you've not really done very much. So I think, a lot of what we've created have to live out our 5 E's about being humane by design. So I think that's really what we spent 20 years building. So it's been quite amazing, yeah.
So it's so amazing. I just smiling about everything you're saying. Everything has been rethought in a creative way, in a more holistic way. And it's so practical too. It's very real world. What it sounds like you're teaching them and preparing them for the world once they graduated. I think that everyone listening in is probably curious to know also about assessment and grading, how you approach that.
Well, a lot of it, eventually, of course, our children sit for the exam. We have the international board, the Cambridge board. So that's happening in 10th, 11th, and 12th. But till such time, we have what I would like to say a plural way to look at my identity. So rather than just one point of data that comes in from just, say, your exam, we have multiple data points, whether it's the identity curriculum that they build, or a student-led portfolio, or their evidence files, or each of them have to do an ICANN project, which is their personal projects in which they present. So we've created, and a jury. We do a lot of jury systems, which is basically how do you sort of validate and justify what you're working on. So we've created intentional ways of what we call multiple data points that we can capture, which is either anecdotal, which is self-reflective, which is peer, which is teacher, which is parent. So it's a nice 360 points. And in the older classes, there's a weightage 60% would possibly be on their grades, but 40% is on who I am in my presence. How have I added value? How do my peers look at me? So it's a fairly, one would say, it takes time, but it's so worth it. I mean, it definitely takes a little bit extra effort to do all of those points, but now it's become so, I would say, natural as part of the process. But it definitely brings a far more understanding of your plural identity, not just one piece of data. So yeah, we've done a lot of work on that as well.
Yeah, it makes a lot more sense to not just be graded on the marks. And I love how you say you're remarkable, reminding them of that all of the time. And I'm sure that you have a pretty good student to teacher ratio too. You have some thoughts on class size and just kind of hook onto that, how you ended up being replicated. I know that you are being used in, your curriculum is being used in other countries. And so take us forward in terms of like how that occurred and actually where your curriculum is being taught outside of India.
Well, I think the fact that I started codifying a lot of what we did had come from my design background. Very, very intuitively, naturally, I started documenting very early on. I mean, I think in my third year of Riverside, people were coming to us and saying, we like what's happening here. We want to do something. So I think the idea of codifying and capturing it into very simple, replicable processes started very early on. I think it's come full circle now. We're going to be 20 years. It's going to be 20 years next year, and we are reaching that milestone. So over time, a lot of what we created was the systems approach to learning. So we've codified, we've got our practices in place, we do a lot of training. And now, of course, we are helping set up a school in Malaysia, ground up. We're helping transform schools in China, in Vietnam. Of course, in India, we've got a lot of schools that we've helped transform. So I think the excitement is that whilst the practices are built in Riverside, they are so fit for context. So at no point are we saying, do what I'm doing. In fact, it is saying that this can work the ingredients are fairly universal. I keep saying the ingredients of empathy are not mine or yours. It's not determined by geography or language or politics. Empathy is a universal value proposition that everybody wants. So I think what we've been able to say that these 5 E's can fit in any context. And I think that's what people have found that resonated with them. They're saying, okay, this is not something that is India specific or specific to a particular geography or context, but can work with anybody. All it needs is really intent and ability to action. And none of it is resource heavy as well. I can say you have a school under a tree, and if all it needs is an adult to listen, you started a school right there. So I think we've been able to see that buy-in really well, and I think that's exciting for us.
Yeah, again, it's very intuitive and integrative and natural in terms of the culture that it's being taught in, and it has that sort of malleability to it that allows it to enable whoever is setting up the curriculum to kind of make it their own and do what's right for their student body. Yeah, I wanted to leave time to talk about design for change, but is there anything else that you want to talk about in terms of the Riverside School or anything that we haven't touched upon yet?
No, I'm saying whenever COVID goes, please, all of you, please come and visit Riverside. I think it'll be really worth your time. I think the one thing that I want to just say is it's built on the banks of the Sabarmati River. And I think it's a very symbolic place. This was the river where Mahatma Gandhi had started his salt march. And my school is built diagonally across his ashram as well. Oh. So I think for me, his aura, his presence is a massive lighthouse for me. When in doubt, when we feel maybe a little weary or tired or kind of confused, I think it's an important idea for a school or for a vision to have some sort of a lighthouse. So I think for us, um, being part of that story, being part of that legacy has been super important for what we do. Yeah. So I just wanted to throw that in.
Powerful, and such also the children are learning about that legacy as well. They're feeling the essence of that when they're in the school and hearing the stories about that, and it sounds amazing. I wanted to ask too some of the comments that the students have made about the school. I know you said one described it as a big hug when they walk in. Do you have any other student comments that you can share?
Well, I mean, I want to share some things that the alumni have said. I mean, I would say that I think your greatest sort of evidence that the 15 years or your value proposition matters lives out in your alumni, right? It goes out, and then the stories they tell about how they've navigated the world is kind of saying, we've done okay. So I'll talk to you about two. One is, of course, my girls. I remember this particular girl, very shy. She was at school and she came from a very, very conservative family. And I remember constantly building that story for her, getting her up. And then when she finally went to college, I remember she wrote back to me 6 months later and said, "Okay, ma'am, you know what I've learned and the most powerful gift you've given me?" So she said, I've learned how to say no. And that's so powerful. And it gave me such gratitude, that she could go out and realize that she could live out her true self without having to succumb to all the pressures that typically our children go through. She said, I can say no, and I'm okay with it. And I'll share with you another one of my boys went to a very, very typical, very, very competitive engineering school that we have in India. And he wrote back again to me saying, "Okay, ma'am, everything was going well." And he said, "I want to share with you one anecdote." He said that we went to the canteen, and when we finished, and I said thank you to the canteen boy, I was picking up my plate to put it back, and my friend started laughing at me. He said, why are you thanking the canteen boy? And it was in these tiny little moments. I'm not talking about the stuff that they're doing academically. They were all doing academically really well. But it's just these tiny moments that they're going out there and saying that I will make my world a little better. I mean, for me, that is really the true testament. I mean, I can tell you all of this, but if you read the stories of my alumni and listen to them, that's when you say, okay, it's a job well done in a way. So yeah, so these have been wonderful, wonderful stories. Yeah.
I would imagine that it's so gratifying for you and your other teachers to that, you hear often that teachers can change the world, and it sounds like you're literally doing that with the curriculum and the holistic approach that you're taking. So bravo. I hope our listeners are enjoying this. I think it's just extraordinary. I did want to also mention, because you do more than just run a school, you do all these other amazing projects in the world. I don't know how you have time to do it with being a mom. But in 2009, you launched called Design for Change, which is a 4-step design framework to cultivate the I can mindset in all children. And it sounds like this is really taking off in a viral way. It's in 60 countries. It's impacting over 2.2 million children and 65,000 teachers. So we're talking a big movement here. So tell us a little bit about your inspiration to start Design for Change and what it does.
Well, the inspiration was really a conversation with a friend of mine. This was in 2009, and he was sharing this wonderful, grand vision of getting India to celebrate the joy of giving, like a festival of giving, like we have festivals like Diwali and Christmas, etc. You might have. He said, what if entire India could do this festival of giving? And he wanted to align it with Gandhi's birthday, right? Every year, starting with Gandhi's birthday on October 2nd, for a week, India will give. Okay, this was his grand vision. And he was sharing with me that he got all these adults and these film actors and corporates, etc., to do this, to join in that movement. And I said, boss, what about kids? He said, then why don't you do it? I said, okay, I will do it. So it really was as simple as that, to say, how do we get children to get this mindset that, sharing, abundance is a mindset to have, right? And that's really how I kind of sort of got my friends from IDEO and D School at Stanford to come in and say, listen, let's kind of do this design thinking process to get children to get a framework to start with empathy and then build agency, right, from empathy. And that's really how the Feel, Imagine, Do, Share sort of framework was created. We call it FIDS for kids, just to make it that much easier to understand. And that's it. Year one, we reached out to 30,000 schools in India. And I remember the first story came to us all the way from Nagaland, one little corner of India. And that's how we started seeing our children. You know, not as young, or we didn't look at them as their gender. We didn't look at them from the demographics. We just looked at the agency. And that's it. So it went viral because I had the opportunity to speak on TED in that year, the first year itself, when TED had come to India for the first year. And apparently my talk went viral, and I was just taken aback by the interest. And suddenly there were people across the world saying, that's what we're looking for. It's so simple. It's so easy. And I think because we removed any bureaucracy from the intent to action, it just exploded. And so today we're in, I think, 70 countries, reaching out to more than maybe 5 million children today. And yeah, and last year, of course, I just want to share, it was 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. We took 3,000 children from 40 countries to Rome on the request of the Pope himself. Thank you very much. And we just kind of took over Rome. We had this massive kind of, presence out there. The kids were amazing. It was a complete joy. It was about children. It had nothing to do with faith. It was just amazing. So that's what Design for Change is doing.
I'm just so inspired by your energy and creativity and everything that you're doing, honestly. So we have just a few minutes left before we start the Q&A. You're also a founder of another initiative to make cities more child-friendly. Tell us about that in just the few remaining minutes we have left.
Yeah, that was actually in 2007. I remember my kids, that was the first batch, and they were in grade 7, so they were all 12 years old. And they were sharing that they would go home and they would not go down they didn't have a playground to play. And because the general sentiment of the city was that the city is not safe for children. That was what was fed into their minds, that, the city doesn't care, and that's why you have 250 TV channels, but no safe city spaces. So that's it. So as part of that, they said, boss, we have to get the city to care for us. So they stomped right into the offices of the municipality, to the police, and, said, we have to make our cities safe. So Approach, which is basically an acronym for a protagonist in every child, was a city initiative that we created. And we closed down the busiest street for traffic 5 times in the year, and literally becomes a metaphor of the city as a playground. So the kids take over the city, they've taken over the parks, the cinema halls are open for the children on the street who can never get to see cinema. So we basically told the city, open up your hearts and your doors and your spaces for children. So that started in 2007, and yeah, we're still making cities child friendly.
And which cities are we talking about? Where was the first place that you did that?
Well, the city I am in, which is Ahmedabad, in the state of Gujarat. We have now at least, I think, 8 cities in India. We've also gone to Mexico, if you please. There's one tiny place in Mexico. We've gone to Bangladesh. And I believe we're also now moving on to Vietnam. So yeah.
I'm wondering about the regulations surrounding that, to go to authorities and say, we're going to shut down the city today so that our kids can play. We're going to turn it into a playground.
It is tough, because you need to definitely get the municipality and the police to become partners, because the police has to get in to close the street from both the ends, right? And what the municipal corporation does is gives us free electricity because we do dancing on the street and we do all of this. Everything is free. Everything is absolutely free for every child. So yes, it took us, I'd like to use the word, we had to be shameless. Completely shameless. We sat in the offices of the police and we didn't leave till he said, okay, go and do it. He thought it's going to happen just once. He said, gosh, they're not going to leave. So let me say, okay. But I think when he came to the street on that first time, I think he realized how beautiful it was. What a symbolism of a city to tell his child that we care. And then we got their buy-in, and then subsequently it became part of the city's culture. And so now it's everywhere. Of course, this year has been unusual because of COVID, so we've not been able to go on the street, but we've pushed it online,
Yeah, I'm wondering does it become multi-generational as well when it's the focus is on children, but I would imagine that the elders and others are participating in that, and also that the first time that you did it and got approval to do it in a particular city, it became easier. Did you film? Did you?
Yeah. Yes, please. Yeah, it's all. If anybody goes onto the website, you can just see the crazy stuff that happens on that street. There's dancing and they're playing games and they're cycling and skating, and it's crazy. And I think why it's important is a child believes that the city cares enough to close down the busiest street. I'm not talking about a side street. I'm not talking about one of those little lanes. We talk in Ahmedabad, the busiest street. And that's big, and that's really something that then the child realizes that, okay, because see, if you care for this child, the child will one day become a citizen and care for the city, right? So it's a long-term investment in the idea that when you take care of the child one day will become that citizen and take care of the city. So it's it's a subtle message right over there.
And I'm wondering, do you have any statistics? It hasn't been that long, but wondering about the lessening of violence or crime or anything like that in these cities where you're doing this, because you are indoctrinating this, more inclusive, safe, respectful attitude by doing these events. And I would think that would have a positive effect.
Well, we just done impact study with the PricewaterhouseCoopers, and they kind of did a study of all the stakeholders and etc. In fact, the study of it is going to come out in a day or two, but they definitely did say that the idea of outdoor play went up much higher. The idea of just the fact that the child felt safer to move in the city. I think that was important, that I could take a public transport and reach safely at the other end. Now, that's a very powerful understanding. And that's important to understand the nuance of not just I'm safe, but I can take a public transport and be safe at the other end. That's very, very powerful. So several of those details were coming out. A lot of the police were saying, it's difficult, but I think it's important because they have to be on the street. But I think it became a citizens' initiative. More data will come out, but it's definitely been worth it. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, so I think we're going to start the Q&A in a few minutes. So is there any parting thoughts or anything else that you might want to add about anything at all that you're involved in, and or any parting words for other teachers out there, maybe?
Well, I think people keep asking if you had one message to say, what would that be? So what will I say? And I think over the years, couple of I keep realizing acutely the importance of today. That's all. I keep saying the only day you have is today. And if you were to think about your practice, your presence, your time, and if you are in front of children, think about the fact that if at the end of the day, supposing the world were to end or whatever, how would you have spent that last message talking to your children? Where would you be? Would you be in a class? Would you be talking to them? Would you be asking them where their homework is? What would be your communication? And I think in many ways, and I think with age, and you start realizing that mortality is a factor in your decision making. And as you grow, I'm acutely more aware that the only day I have is today. And if I can leave today a little better, a little kinder, a little more comforting for somebody else, I think tomorrow will take care of itself. So I'm not a great fan of 5-year plans. I've never been a great fan of 5-year plans. I think plans are very limiting. But I genuinely have the opportunity that if I wake up and I have the great maybe luxury of being alive today, then I must make it matter. And I'm going to do whatever it takes to make it a little better. So yeah, that's something I'd like to share.
Yes, and agreed that presence is so important for any age, right? And it's up to us, the older generations, to instill that in our children from a very early age, as you know. So I just love those parting words, and I think it's great advice for anyone of any age listening in today.
Thank you so much, ladies. That was just beyond inspiring. I'm a mother too, and gosh, I wish I could have sent my children to your school, Kiran. Oh my goodness. We do have some questions coming in, and Katie's going to be posting them, but I had a couple that I'll ask now until we see them. I was curious about whether you receive any assistance with the school financially from the government, or is this a private school entirely?
Yeah, this is a private school, because if you would like to take a board, I mean, your affiliation, which is not the state government, then you have to take what is called a no objection certificate, that you don't need any funds from the government and you don't come under their mandate. And that's really an important space for autonomy. Having said that, I think what's really interesting is Riverside serves a completely diverse population. We have a mini India. So we have 25% of my children who come from below poverty line, so they're completely free. Then I have around, I think, 15% who come from what we would call the special needs, the idea that they have special abilities that we need to address. And then, of course, I have diversity in terms of communities and, religious affiliation. So I think what is very important for us is diversity and inclusion became like the mantra for admission. We had to have that in. We had to make sure that we have a little reflection of India at Riverside. And we're a small school, so my intake is just at the youngest years, just 25 every year. And in that 25, we have to make sure that we have a lovely balance of all. So it's been interesting.
So another question I had is, how are you handling the virus? Because the kids aren't physically on campus currently. I'm just curious if you've got an innovative answer for us in America, where it's just a hodgepodge of hit or miss tactics, opening and closing 2 weeks later. It's crazy here. So what have you concluded is the best way to handle the virus this year?
Well, if you've been up to date with the news, India is slowly inching to be the biggest and the most infections, right? So we are at a precarious time. Our curve has not flattened. Having said that, I think we Indians are fantastically sturdy people. So our mortality rate has been remarkably low. And I think it just has to do with our immunity. I think so. That's been a blessing. Having said that, schools have not yet opened. I think different states are taking different decisions. The state I am in has chosen to defer opening for physical till post Diwali. So that is, I think, for another month. But I'll tell you only 3 things I've learned. 1, relationships. That makes the biggest. More than everything else, I would say that what we've learned is to work with our children on that. Another lesson I've learned is slow is good. Slow is good. Take your time. There is no hurry. Just, and less is more. These are the 3 lessons we've learned in terms of just going online. So please don't pack it in. Remember, less is more. Just work on children. Just listen and laugh and make your connections and take your time on that. Believe you me, they will learn all the math through Khan Academy. They'll be fine. But they're not going to learn about who they are, except for you. So I would say focus on that. And definitely, it's okay breathe and go slow. Don't worry, they're not losing a year. They'll gain a lot by what you will give them. So don't give that pressure over there. Yeah.
So the children are pretty connected then in terms of internet. You're able to communicate with them fine.
No, not all. Like I said, because we serve, like I said, such a diverse population. So we've done a lot of other things, like we've done giving data cards, and we've made sure that, they can get some devices, or we do WhatsApp. I mean, everything everybody else is going. Nothing that is what I'm going to be sharing is any unique just to Riverside. But you have to put the effort to make sure that happens. You have to ensure, because that's easy to fall out. I mean, the fact that if a child doesn't have a device, it's very easy to forget, because as it is, the pressure is so high. But you need to take that time and make sure that those children are noticed and they're served. So it took us a while, but I think the team just was outstanding, the way we set up little learning pods wherever the children could be together. Data cards, a lot of our parents supported. Parents said, listen, we're chipping in. If you feel you need data cards for the children or you need devices, let us know. So I think we really became a family. And that was so cool. That the parents were also coming and saying, listen, we're in this with you. And I think a lot of the 20 years of investing in our parents served us today when we needed their support. So we really, really I'm just super grateful right now for everything that the parents, the team did. Yeah.
Well, that's great. We have sort of the same issue where I live, because not all children have internet access, or if they do have internet access, some of them don't have the equipment to go online because we're in the Appalachian Mountains. Anyway, I was just curious about that. So the question that's up is about its affordability, and I think you kind of already addressed that you give scholarships. Is there anything else you want to say about the affordability of the school for the population?
Yeah, no, like I said, 25% totally free. So scholarships are either given by some parents. A lot of our teachers have actually pooled in a fund for some of the kids. We've got our alumni who are now giving back to the school for scholarships as well. So scholarships is a big piece, 100% till 25%. So it can go all the way. And that allows us to build that diversity, yes.
Another person had written in the comment box asking about disabilities. Do you have any children there who have learning disabilities, and how do you?
Oh, yes. Well, luckily our numbers are small. So, but we have I think 15 or 20% of our children who have some or the other, this thing. It could be as much as autism. We had one child who was a quadriplegic. We have children who have different other abilities. We make a lot of effort. We do buddy system. We do one-on-ones. We have, of course, professionals on campus who come counsel. We have parents who kind of partner. So it really becomes a way for the community to participate, and I think that's been a great blessing. I have to also again reference that we are a small school. We are a single section. We are at full capacity. We are 420. So, and my student teacher ratio is 1:7. So we have that luxury of doing that, and we put in the effort, and we really reach out to parents and stuff. So it's a community support rather than a one person, or the child is going off to a special needs person. This is everybody kind of comes in. And I keep saying, I've realized one thing: we all are specially able. Either some is spiritually deprived, or somebody's. So I keep thinking that deprivation is all of us. All of us have got some need, and if one can recognize in that perspective that it's all of us need to be included, and all of us need compassion, and then you just suddenly realize it's not this person or that person. It becomes a collective. Somebody just needs it for that day, and somebody needs it as a little longer engagement. But I think we all reach out to each other.
It sounds like an amazing environment you've created, truly diverse, truly focused on the values we wish to instill in our children. It's just amazing, Kiran. Another question I had was, how do you select your textbooks? Because in America, there tends to be a monopoly on how books are chosen. And in our country, a lot of them come from Texas, and the body of supposed experts tend to think that we should be teaching things like creation theory, and it's creeping into our schools. So I'm just curious about how you select your books and your content.
Oh, what an interesting question. I've never really been asked that before. Again, textbooks till grade 7, till they're like 13, are not very big on our radar, because a lot of our learning is really not textbook driven, right? So that's really a reason why we've created processes and our programs that allow children to go beyond. Having said that, though, the fact that we have to sit for an exit examination in your 10th and then finally 12th, we have to take the books that are prescribed by the board, right? That's for specifically for 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. So that's a fairly simple this thing. But since textbooks do play some role, because we need to have at least base level threshold learning, every year different publishers come to the school and they kind of show us their list, and the team kind of pretty much decides. I actually don't even get into that. The team decides what's best for the children, or what are the support systems that the publisher might be giving. So it's really weighted by the team, and they would take the textbooks. Even price point is important. We definitely also look at price point a little bit for our kids. Yeah.
We also had a question about, since it is such a novel school, is there a long wait list if you can only take 400 kids a year or 25 new kids a year? I think I heard you say
Yes.
that must be, tell us what.
Yeah, I mean, I've got mails from parents who are not even pregnant as yet saying, listen, when I'm pregnant, it's crazy. And I'm saying, are you serious? Please come to me when you get your child. So yes, now, I mean, of course, since last, but I do remember a time when I started where the first 25 children that I had, I kid you not, except for probably 5 or 7 who knew me and sent their kids, and one was mine. I kid you not, there were parents who came here because they thought, listen, it's close by, or their child didn't get into any other school, and they said they're just giving them to me for 2 years and then they'll shift. Of course, all those children graduated from Riverside, but I didn't care. I just needed children and they needed to start. So I was taking anybody. Now, of course, parents who want this kind of value or this kind of school, of course, come to us. Luckily now, there's so many more options for children and parents in the city I am in now. I remember 20 years ago, there wasn't really that many, very much. And I think Riverside played a role in putting an impetus to say this kind of education is good and it's nice. And so most schools started with a similar, maybe not entirely the same, but similar kind of thing, sort of value proposition. So now parents have a lot more choice, which is great. But yes, since I have only 25, it's a fairly competitive system, yeah. Hello? I'm stuck.
I think we
is Laura stuck?
Lost. Okay, so it looks like there's another question that someone asked about vetting the instructors. How do you?
Oh, I remember when I started, I used to just beg and say, please join me, I need teachers. Yeah, no, but of course now it's they have to do demonstrations and they have to kind of come and spend like a week here before we decide and they decide. So it's a fairly systematic system about, because you have to fit into this. Either you will leave in the first week itself because you'll realize, my God, this is not what I signed up for, this amount of work, or you'll stay for 10 years, right? So I have now 70 teachers in my team, and I think at least 50% have been with me for 10 years and more. Wow. Which is superb. And my first team that started, my first 5 are still with me 20 years down. So like I said, either you will leave very quickly, because most often than not, teachers don't expect to do this sort of work. They think, oh, I have to just teach, right? I have to open up a textbook and teach. So you'll either fit into the culture, or you will say this is not for me and leave. So yeah, so it's always going to be a struggle, because I don't think, especially now with COVID, it's become even more difficult to figure out whether teachers want to do this sort of stuff. It's tough. Yeah, it's tough.
And I think about it from an HR perspective. When you're finding talent, those softer skills that you really don't know about the person until they're on the job sometimes.
Absolutely.
That would be part of what you're up against there, because it's not just looking at their education, it's their interaction with the children and their openness to trying different ways of doing things. I think you may not even know about that until they're in the position of teacher.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, and I think and especially now during this time, when you see face to face, when you're meeting somebody every single day, you still have a chance to build that. But suddenly, if you get somebody straight away online, and you've not had an opportunity to meet face to face, it's going to be even more difficult. And I'm curious to know how, going forward, how do you bring back again that culture? Because at Riverside, I have to say that we hug a lot. We're a very physical kind of team. I mean, there's a lot of hugging, and there's a lot of that physical contact. And now we're told, no, you please stay away and do fist pumps. What the hell are fist pumps, for crying out loud? So yeah, so I think we have to kind of figure out how to shift and still retain that sense of collegiality and sense of family, fist pumping each other.
So to prove that I live in the Appalachian Mountains, my internet went out. Anyway, so I'm sorry I missed a few moments of questions. I'm trying to think what else I was curious about. Let's see. I'm looking in the chat. I'm curious to know about whether you're teaching things or holding sessions that involve some of the issues raised last night by our keynote speakers. So whether you're teaching a new story about the history of humanity, for instance, we learned about the partnerism is the new term that Rianne Eisler is using to describe how humans used to live. We used to live in a much more gender equitable fashion. Also, I'm curious about whether you're doing any meditation training, like as part of their day, quiet time, meditating as part of their day, learning about peace studies and nonviolent sort of communication skills. Can you tell us if you're doing things like that? Because they're just starting here in the schools in the U.S., those sorts of programs.
Yeah. Well, reflective practice is definitely big. Not necessarily through either a religious lens or I think two things we chose to be very clear that we will not make it part of not make it part of, but we would like to stay away as politics and religion. Both, I don't think necessarily need to play. Having said that, when there have been concerns that have risen either in India or say globally, like for instance, we just recently had a big uprising on gender. I mean, there was this thing about the LGBTQ, how India is kind of framing this. What do we mean? We definitely bring that, and because we love believing that humans come in all colors and shapes and sizes. So we had a lot of discussion. We invited experts. We had the idea of how can I be okay with my sexuality and, all of that. So definitely if it is needed and topical, I'll give you right now an example of safety, cybersecurity and cyber safety became a big thing. Suddenly now, if all of our learning is online, how do you stay safe online, and make sure that you have a certain sense of what we call digital safety and digital hygiene. That's how you can do. So we would talk a lot about that. Mindfulness is big. We do mindfulness exercises just to kind of slow down and be centered. Just to say, how do I just breathe and how do I just start a session, just noticing and observing myself and my breath. So we do that, but we've tried to stay away from religion, so no flavor of that comes into Riverside, and politics, because I think both can be very volatile. And I would rather build more spaces for discourse rather than just being, disagreeable. So yes, we definitely do bring it in, but not as a big thing. Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful. The mindfulness training is so important. So we have a question from Facebook. As a parent, what can you do to encourage this kind of free thinking and collaboration at home? Because we often follow the way we're taught, which is the old world. Yeah, you run into situations where family isn't enforcing the value.
I'm going to only share what I experienced, and I think that helped me build at least my worldview. I'm not advocating necessarily that, but I had parents who listened. That was big. I didn't have parents who dictated and decided or just instructed. I think they built the value for conversations. Our dinner table stuff was awesome. I have to say, the dinner time conversations and stories was just the whole heart of the house. I grew up at a time when there was no television, no phones. I genuinely believe that allowed us to have conversations. So I would recommend that if, as a family, you could build time which is for just listening without the interface, I think that's a big step in opening up a space for free thinking. That was big, and I had parents who mimicked that, and I was looking at my dad and my mom and realizing, actually, that's okay. I mean, I could say that was fine. So I had to see role models. I can't tell my child to be free thinking and me not do that and not live that out. So I have to be worth mimicking. I have to be worth imitating. I have to live out that is worth being mimicked. So I would say, be that parent that a child deserves. Be that kind of parent. Yeah.
I am curious about the visit with the Pope. Tell us a little bit more about that.
I have to tell you
about it. Yeah, tell us more about that.
All of that is separate, but I hugged him before he knew what hit him. Before he knew, I just kind of went up and said, "Papa, can I give you a hug?" And before he knew it, I had hugged him. I said, "That's my thing. I won't know when I'll get this." But I'll just give you the backstory. 2015, I was invited by the Vatican to speak at their Congress. Every year they have a Congress of all the Catholic schools. And I was the only non-Catholic to be invited because they were really shifting into doing service learning. And they were trying to find a model where all their schools could move into a service learning mindset. And they found Design for Change, invited me to speak. And the gentleman who invited me spoke only Spanish and I spoke only English. And we both fell in love. He was the wonderfulest, most kindest brother, Juan Antonio. I loved him and he loved me. And then I met him in 2016, again in Madrid. And at that time, I was 49 years old. And I was going to turn 50 in April. And I just kidded to Brother Juan Antonio. I said, "Brother Juan, for my 50th birthday, please make me meet Papa. I will be eternally." So he kept saying, "Sí, vale." So I didn't understand anything. But he kept working on it because we had signed up with the Vatican to take Design for Change to all their 200,000 schools across the world. And in 2017, I kept saying, "Brother Juan Antonio, now I'm 51 and you're not letting me meet Papa. Please make me meet Papa." He literally called me up overnight and I was it was in June 2017. I had to go to Johannesburg for another conference. And he said, "Kiran, blah, 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 blah." And, I understood that we had the meeting with the Pope. And from Johannesburg, I flew all the way to Rome, literally over one night, went to the Vatican, signed the agreement with Papa and pretty much hugged him and then came back and then planned the 2019 event, sitting there saying, "Papa, if we really trust our children, let's make this event happen in Rome." And he said, "Yeah," and yes, and that's how it happened. And I met him again in Rome last year.
And then did I hear you say you took how many children? Did you say 3,000 kids?
3,000, yeah, from 40 countries.
Went to Italy.
Yes,
that's
to
amazing.
Rome.
That's amazing.
It is amazing because we had no money. We didn't know the language. We were 5 of us working on this. I tell you, it was a miracle. It was literally, they say, no, if you want something, if you really, 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 really want something, then you will have to make it. It has to be beyond your ego, beyond your time, beyond your sleep, beyond anything. You just have to really, really, really want it. And I am telling you, I have no idea if I write a book on that, people will wonder how the hell did it was a 5-member team. We didn't know the language, we didn't know the place, and we land up in Rome, and it was crazy. But it was amazing. It rained every single day except for those 3 days. I'm telling you, the gods wanted this to happen. It rained every single day, and then those just 3 days. It was sunshine, and not a single child got lost. They all went back home, and I was saying, God, thank you.
That's a lot of children to watch over. 3,000 children. You are a force of nature. In the few minutes we have left, I don't see any more questions coming from the audience. So I was curious about, if we do have some teachers listening, and I really hope that we do, how would they go about accessing the curriculum? And is it sort of a franchise system? Like, can you explain how your programming is expanding around the globe and how one might go about being part of that expansion?
Well, for Design for Change, it is entirely free. So all you have to do is get onto the website. Everything is open source. If you're in a particular country, there's a drop down, and you can find whether your country is represented with a partner there. Please reach out to the partner and just join the movement there, and get all your children to take part in the movement, because there are super celebrations and etc. So that's one part. So Design for Change is, like I said, an entirely free initiative, except for, of course, if you want to do training, etc. But for the children, it's free. Riverside Learning Center is the training leg of Riverside, right? And that, of course, is the program that we work with a school on a more immersive way. So you could do multiple things. You can come for a study tour. You could do culture by design. You could set up a school. But that is by virtue of our engagement with you. So feel free to look at the website, riversidelearningcenter.in. Look at the work we're doing. We are happy to work across the world right now. We would be delighted to support more schools who want to make humane cultures. So these are the 2 ways.
Well, if we have a community growing here. It's called the Valley of Light. And if we get it sufficient in size that we want to start a school, you will be hearing from us.
Yes.
And everything that you've implemented, it also reminds me of the schools at Damanhur, which are also very creative. Damanhur is a community in Italy. It's just so exciting to hear about these new ways of learning, because our kids here do feel like they're in jail half the time. Oh, I know another question I had, if we've got time. It popped into my head. Your design is open and airy, but that's partially, of course, due to your climate. How could we build schools in the US where it's a lot colder in the winter, and we can't have so many open courtyards? Would you suggest glass? I'm just curious, a few tips for any architects who are listening on how to design schools in colder climates.
Well, I've actually seen some really interesting schools. I've traveled, luckily, across the world, and I'm seeing a lot of schools. So a lot of what we call we call them shades. So a lot more shaded open spaces, which of course, if you have money, I've seen schools where they have retractable roofs. So during the winter, during rain, it kind of folds up and then it retracts, and then you can open it out and have it for during the summer and open spaces. So there are lots of innovative ways now where people can still have not just one building and vertical, but a lot more sort of spaces that move. I've seen a really interesting school in Italy, in Reggio Emilia, where the school is on tracks. So it kind of moves in and out also, units of the school can move out, and then you have open spaces during summer, then it moves back in. So, I mean, the stuff is super, super amazing, depending on weather and depending on indigenous use of material, when you want to reduce the footprint and make it more sustainable. So there's just so much exciting stuff now in architecture. And architecture can play such a significant role in to help make the space a third teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So there's very, very exciting stuff happening here.
Do you have gardens at your school? Are the children growing food?
Yeah. Not as much as I would want. I'm a very tiny school, so we have some roof gardens that we try to create. We've got some beds, but we have monkeys on our campus, and they're eating all my vegetables, and I don't like it. In fact, 2 days ago, we had 3 snakes on campus. I had a python, a cobra, and a rat snake. I'm telling you, when the humans are away, the animals are playing. So we've got the monkeys who eat up all my brinjals and my spinach and my fruits. But we try. Not as much as we like, though.
Oh, gosh. I hope I get to visit your school. Gina, you and I got to go.
It'd be lovely.
Yeah, you are such a joy. I mean, just everything about your energy, and it's been really lovely to have you with us today. And I know this is going to help open up the minds of a lot of people out there in terms of education and how it's done. So.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody. Thank you. God bless. Bye. See you.